Hello guys, the techniques we looked in the previous video are designed to reduce congestion and improve network performance. However, with the growth of multimedia networking, serious attempts at guaranteeing quality of service through network and the protocol design are needed. Today, we will focus on ways to provide a quality of service matched to application needs. Quality of service includes the requirements of quality of service, techniques for achieving good quality of service, integrated services, differentiated services, label switching, and MPLS. First, we will see requirements. The stream of packets from a source to a destination is called a flow. In a connection-oriented network, all the packets belonging to a flow follow the same route. In a connection-less network, they may follow different routes. The needs for each flow can be characterized by four primary parameters: reliability, delay, jitter, and bandwidth. Together, these parameters determine a quality of service that flow requires. Several common applications and their requirements are listed in the table and shown in the slide. The first four applications have high requirements on reliability. No bits may be delivered incorrectly. This goal is usually achieved by checking or checksumming each packet and verifying the checksum at the destination. If a packet is damaged in the transmission, it is not acknowledged and will be transmitted once again. This strategy gives high reliability. The four final applications, that is audio and video applications, can tolerate errors, so no checksums are computed or verified. The file transfer applications, including email and video, are not delay sensitive. If all packets are delayed uniformly by 2 seconds, no harm is done. Interactive applications such as web surfing and remote login are more delay sensitive. Real-time applications such as telephony and video conferencing have strict delay requirements. If all the words in a telephone call are each delayed by exactly 2 seconds, the user will find the connection unacceptable. On the other hand, playing audio and video files from a server does not require load delay. The first three applications are not sensitive to the packets, arriving with irregular time intervals between them. Remote login is somewhat sensitive to that, since characters on the screen will appear in little bursts if the connection suffers much jitter. Video and especially audio are extremely sensitive to jitter. If a user is watching a video over the network and the frames are all delayed by exactly 2 seconds, no harm is done. But if the transmission time varies randomly between 1 and 2 seconds, the result will be terrible. For audio, a jitter of even few milliseconds is clearly audible. The application differs in their bandwidth requirements. For example, email and remote login applications needs less bandwidth, while all video applications demands for more bandwidth. ATM networks classify flows in four broad categories with respect to their quality of service demands. For example, constant bitrate traffic used for telephony applications, real-time variable bitrate traffic used for compressed video conferencing, real-time, non-real-time, variable bitrate traffic used for watching a movie over the internet, and available bitrate traffic is used for file transfer. Then techniques for achieving good quality of service. The examples of techniques for achieving good quality of service are over provisioning, buffering, traffic skipping, the leaky bucket algorithm, the token bucket algorithm, reservation, that is resource reservation, admission control, packet scheduling, and so on. No single technique provides efficient, dependable quality of service in an optimum way. A variety of techniques have been developed. These techniques are developed with practical solutions that combines multiple techniques. We will now examine some of the techniques some system designers uses to achieve quality of service. First one is over provisioning. An easy solution is to provide so much router capacity, buffer space and bandwidth that the packets just fly through easily. The trouble with this solution is that it is more expensive. The next one is buffering. Flows can be buffered on the receiving side before being delivered. Buffering them does not affect the reliability or bandwidth, and it doesn't increases any jitter. It increases the delay but smooths out the jitter. For audio and video on demand, jitter is the main problem. So this technique helps a lot. In figure, we see a stream of packets being delivered with substantial jitter. Packet 1 is sent from the server at time t is equal to 0 seconds and arrives at the client at time t is equal to 1 second. Packet 2 undergoes more delay and takes 2 seconds to arrive. As the packet arrive, they are buffered on the client machine. At time t is equal to 10 seconds, playback begins. At this time, packets 1 through have been buffered so that they can be removed from the buffers at uniform intervals for smooth play. Unfortunately, packet 8 has been delayed so much that is not available when its place slot comes up. So, playback must stop until it arrives, creating gap in the music or movie. This problem can be reduced by delaying starting time even more. The next one is traffic shaping. Traffic shaping is about regulating the average rate of data transmission. When a connection is set up, the user and the subnet agree on a certain traffic pattern for that circuit. Sometimes this is called a service level agreement. Traffic shaping reduces congestion and thus helps the carrier live up to its promise. Such agreements are not so important for file transfers but are of great importance for real-time traffic, such as video and audio connections. Monitoring traffic flow is called traffic polishing. Agreeing to a traffic shape and polishing it are easier with virtual circuit subnets than with datagram subnets. However, even with datagram subnets, the same idea can be applied to transport layer connections. Then leaky bucket algorithm. Imagine a bucket with a small hole in the bottom, which is illustrated in the figure A. No matter the rate at which water enters in the bucket, the outflow is at constant rate. Once the bucket is full, any additional water entering it spills over the sides and is lost. The same idea can be applied to packets, which is shown in the figure B. Conceptually, each host is connected to the network by an interface containing the leaky bucket, that is a finite interval queue. If a packet arrives at the queue and when it is full, the packet is discarded. This arrangement can be built into the hardware interface or simulated by the host operating system, and it is called as leaky bucket algorithm. The host is allowed to put one packet per clock tick onto the network. Again, this can be enforced by the interface card or by the operating system. This mechanism runs on uneven turns. This mechanism turns uneven flow of the packet from the user processes inside the host into an even flow of the packet onto the network, smoothing out bursts and greatly reducing the chances of congestion. Implementing the original leaky bucket algorithm is easy. The leaky bucket consists of finite queue. When a packet arrives, if there is a room on the queue, it is appended to the queue. Otherwise, it is discarded. At every clock tick, one packet is transmitted. The next one is token bucket algorithm. In this algorithm, the leaky bucket holds tokens, and these tokens are generated by a clock at the rate of one token every delta t seconds. Figure A shows bucket holding 3 tokens with 5 packets waiting to be transmitted. For the packet to be transmitted, it must capture and destroy one token. Figure B shows the 3 packets out of 5 packets have got the token and they are passed over the network, but the other 2 packets are stuck waiting for 2 more tokens to be generated. The token bucket algorithm provides a different kind of traffic shaping than the leaky bucket algorithm. The token bucket algorithm throws away tokens when the bucket fills up, but never discards the packets. In contrast, the leaky bucket algorithm discards packets when the bucket fills up. Here, a minor variant is possible in which each token represents the right to send not one packet but k bytes. A packet can only be transmitted if enough tokens are available to cover its length in bytes. The leaky bucket and token bucket algorithms can also be used to smooth traffic between routers as well as to regulate host output. Then resource reservation. Being able to regulate the shape of the offered traffic is a good start to guaranteeing the quality of service. However, effectively using this information implicitly means requiring all the packets of a flow to flow over a same route. Spraying them over a router at random makes it hard to guarantee anything. As a consequence, something similar to the virtual circuits has to be set up from the source to the destination, and all the packets that belongs to the flow must follow the same route. Once we have specific route for the flow, it becomes possible to reserve resources along that route. Three kinds of resources can be reserved. That resources are bandwidth, buffer space, and CPU cycles. The next one is admission control. Now, we are at the point where the incoming traffic from some flow is well shaped and can potentially follow a single route in which capacity can be reserved in advance on the routers along the path. When such a flow is offered to a router, it has to decide based on its capacity and how many commitments it has already made for other flows, whether to admit or reject the flow. It has to decide. The decision to accept or reject a flow is not a simple matter because many parties may be involved in the flow negotiation. The sender, the receiver, and all the routers along the path between them. Flows must be described accurately in terms of specific parameters that can be negotiated. A set of such parameters is called flow specification. Typically, the sender produces a flow specification proposing the parameters it will like to use. As the specification propagates along the route, each router examines it and modifies the parameter if needed. The modifications can only reduce the flow but doesn't increase it. When it gets to the other end, the parameters can be established. As an example of what can be in the flow specification, consider the example shown in the table. It has 5 parameters. The first of which is the token bucket rate. Token bucket rate is the number of bytes per second that are put into the bucket. This is the maximum sustained rate the sender may transmit, averaged over a long time interval. The second parameter is the size of the bucket in bytes. Third parameter is the peak data rate, is the maximum tolerant transmission rate even for brief time intervals. The sender must never exceed this rate. The last two parameters specify the minimum and maximum packet sizes, including the transport and network layer headers. The minimum size is important because processing each packet takes some fixed time. The maximum packet size is important due to internal network limitations that may not be exceeded. For example, if part of the path goes over an Ethernet, the maximum packet size will be restricted to no more than 1500 bytes, no matter what the rest of the network can handle. In proportional routing, the most routing algorithms try to find the best path for each destination and send all traffic to that destination over the best path. A different approach that has been proposed to provide a higher quality of service is to split the traffic for each destination over multiple paths. Since routers generally do not have a complete overview of the network-wide traffic, the only feasible way is to split the traffic over a multiple routes is to use locally available information. A simple method is to divide the traffic equally or in proportion to the capacity of the outgoing links. However, more sophisticated algorithms are also available. Then packet scheduling. If a router is handling multiple flows, it is better to use a pair queuing algorithm. The essence of the algorithm is that routers have separate queues for each output line, one for each flow. When a line becomes idle, the router scans the queues in round robin, taking the first packet on the next queue. In this way, with n hosts competing for a given output line, each host gets to send one out of every n packets. Sending more packets will not improve this fraction. The algorithm has a problem. It uses more bandwidth to hosts that use a large packets than to hosts that uses the small packets. The algorithm was improved in which the round robin is done in such a way that the information is transmitted byte by byte round robin instead of packet by packet round robin. In effect, it scans the queues repeatedly byte for byte until it finds the tick on which each packet will be finished. The packets are then stored in order of their finishing and sent it that order. The algorithm is illustrated in the figure. In figure A, we see packets of length 2 to 6 bytes. At clock tick 1, the first byte of the packet on the line is A is sent. Then goes the next byte of the packet on the line B, and so on. The first packet C finishes after 8 ticks. The sorted order is given in the figure B. One problem with this algorithm is that it gives all hosts the same priority. In many situations, it is desirable to give video servers more bandwidth than regular file servers so that they can be given 2 or more bytes per tick. The modified algorithm is called weighted pair queuing and it is widely used nowadays. Then next one is integrated services. It was aimed at both unicast and multicast applications. An example of the unicast is a single user streaming a video clip from a news site. An example of the multicast is a collection of digital television stations broadcasting their programs as streams of IP packets to many receivers at various locations. In many multicast applications, groups can change membership dynamically. Then RSVP, that is the Resource Reservation Protocol. This protocol is used for making the reservations. Other protocols are used for sending the data. RSVP allows multiple senders to transmit to the multiple group of receivers, permits individual receivers to switch channels freely, and optimizes bandwidth use while at the same time eliminating congestion. In its simplest form, the protocol uses multicast routing using spanning trees. Each group is assigned a group address. To send to a group, a sender puts the group address in its packets. The standard multicast routing algorithm then builds a spanning tree covering all group members. As an example, consider network in figure A. Host 1 and 2 are multicast senders, and the host 3, 4, 5 are the multicast receivers. In this example, the senders and receivers are disjoint, but in general, the two sets may overlap. The multicast trees for host 1 and 2 are shown in figure B and C respectively. To get better reception and eliminate conjunction, any of the receivers in the group can send a reservation message up to the tree to the sender. The message is propagated using the reverse path forwarding algorithm. At each hop, the router notes the reservation and reserves the necessary bandwidth. If inefficient or sufficient bandwidth is not available, it reports back failure. By the time the message gets back to the source, the bandwidth has been reserved all the way or from the sender to the receiver, making the reservation request along the spanning tree. An example of such reservation is shown in the figure A. Here, host 3 has requested a channel to host 1. Once it has been established, packets can flow from host 1 to the host 3 without congestion. Now consider what happens if host 3 next reserves a channel to the another sender, that is host 2. So the user can watch two television programs at once. A sends path, here a second path is reserved, which is illustrated in figure B. Note that two separate channels are needed from host 3 to router E because two independent streams are being transmitted. Finally, in figure C, host 5 decides to watch the program being transmitted by host 1 and also makes a reservation. First, dedicated bandwidth is reserved as far as router H. However, this router sees that it already has a feed from host 1. So, if the necessary bandwidth has already been reserved, it does not have to reserve anymore. Note that hosts 3 and 5 might have asked for different amounts of bandwidth. So the capacity reserved must be large enough to satisfy the greediest receiver. When making a reservation, a receiver can satisfy one or more sources that it wants to receive from. It can also specify whether these choices are fixed for the duration of reservation or whether the receiver wants to keep open the option for changing resources later. The routers use this information to optimize bandwidth planning. In particular, two receivers are only set up to share a path if they both agree not to change sources later on. Once a receiver has reserved bandwidth, it can switch to another source and keep that portion of the existing path that is valid for the new source. If host 2 is transmitting several video streams, for example, host 3 may switch between them at will without changing its reservation. The routers do not care what programs the receiver is watching. Now, we will see RSVP protocol, that is the resource reservation protocol. The protocol is used for making the reservations. Other protocols are used for sending the data. RSVP allows multiple senders to transmit to multiple groups of receivers and permits the individual receivers to switch channels freely and optimizes the bandwidth used while at the same time eliminating the congestion. The simplest form In the simplest form, the protocol uses the multicast routing using spanning trees. Each group is assigned a group address. To send a group, a sender puts the group's address in its packets. The standard multicast routing protocol then builds a spanning tree covering all group members. As an example, consider a network. Now we will see RSVP, that is the resource. Okay, sir. Now we will see RSVP, the resource reservation protocol. This protocol is used for making the reservations. RSVP allows multiple senders to transmit to multiple groups of receivers, permits individual receivers to switch channels freely, and optimizes bandwidth use while at the same time eliminating the congestion. In its simplest form, the protocol uses multicast routing using spanning trees. Each group is assigned group address. To send to the group, the sender puts the group's address into packet. The standard multicast routing protocol then builds a spanning tree covering all group members. As an example, consider a network in figure A. Here, hosts 1 and 2 are multicast senders and hosts 3, 4, and 5 are multicast receivers. The multicast trees for host 1 and 2 are shown in figure B and C respectively. To get better reception and eliminate congestion, any of the receivers in the group can send a reservation message up the tree to the sender. The message is propagated using the reverse path forwarding algorithm. At each hop, the router notes the reservation and reserves the necessary bandwidth. If insufficient bandwidth is available, it reports back failure. By the time the message gets back to the source, bandwidth has been reserved all the way from the sender to the receiver making the reservation request along the spanning tree. An example of such a reservation is shown in the figure A. Here, host 3 has requested a channel to host 1. Once it has been established, packets can flow from 1 to 3 without congestion. Now consider what happens if host 3 reserves a channel to the other sender, host 2. So the user can watch 2 television programs at the same time. A second path is reserved as shown in the figure B. Note that 2 separate channels are needed from host 3 to the router E because 2 independent streams are to be transmitted. Finally, in figure C, host 5 decides to watch the program being transmitted by host 1 and also makes a reservation. First, dedicated bandwidth is reserved as far as router H. However, this router sees that it already has a feed from host 1. So if the necessary bandwidth has already been reserved, it does not have to reserve anymore. Note that hosts 3 and 5 might have asked for different amounts of bandwidth, so the capacity reserved must be large enough to satisfy the greediest receiver. When making a reservation, a receiver can specify one or more sources that it wants to receive from. It can also specify whether these choices are fixed for the duration of reservation or whether the receiver wants to keep open the option of changing sources later. The routers use this information to optimize bandwidth planning. In particular, 2 receivers are only set up to share a path if they both agree not to change sources later on. Once the receiver has a reserved bandwidth, it can switch to another service and keep that portion of the existing path that is valid for new source. If host 2 is transmitting several video streams, for example, host 3 may switch between them at its will without changing its reservation. The routers do not care what programs the receiver is watching. Then differentiated services. Differentiated services, that is DS, can be offered by a set of routers forming an administrative domain, that is Internet Service Provider. The administration defines a set of service classes which corresponding or with corresponding forwarding rules. If a customer signs up for differentiated services, customer packets entering the domain may carry a type of service field in them, with better service provided to some classes than other classes. Traffic within a class may be required to conform to some specific shape, such as leaky bucket with some specified drain rate. Note that this scheme requires no advanced setup, no resource reservation, and no time-consuming end-to-end negotiation for each flow, as with integrated services. This makes differentiated services relatively easy to implement. To make the difference between flow-based quality of service and the class-based quality of service, consider an example. That is the example of internet telephony. With a flow-based scheme, each telephone call gets its own resources and guarantees. With a class-based scheme, all the telephone calls together get the resources reserved for the class telephony. These resources cannot be taken away by packets from the file transfer class or other classes. But no telephone call gets any private resources reserved for it alone. Then expedited forwarding. The choice of service classes is up to the each operator. But since packets are often forwarded between subnets run by different operators, IETF is working on defining network independent class or network independent service classes. The simplest class is expedited forwarding. The idea behind expedited forwarding is very simple. Two classes of service are available, regular and expedited. The vast majority of traffic is expected to be a regular traffic, but a small fraction of packets are expedited. The expedited packets should be able to transmit a subnet. No other packets were present. A symbolic representation of this two-tip system is shown in the figure. Note that there is still just one physical line. The two logical pipes shown in the figure represents way to reserve bandwidth, not a second physical line. One way to implement this strategy is to program the routers to have two output queues for each outgoing line, one for expedited packets and one for regular packets. When a packet arrives, it is queued accordingly. Packet scheduling should use something like a weighted fair queuing. For example, if 10% of the traffic is expedited and 90% of the traffic is regular traffic, 20% of the bandwidth could be dedicated to expedited traffic, and the rest of the traffic is used. Rest of the bandwidth is dedicated for regular traffic. Doing so would give the expedited traffic twice as much bandwidth as it needs in order to provide low delay for it. This allocation can be achieved by transmitting one expedited packet for every 4 regular packets. Then assured forwarding. A somewhat more elaborate scheme for managing the service classes is called assured forwarding. It specifies that there shall be 4 priority classes, each class having its own resources. In addition, it defines 3 discard policy probabilities, and these discard probabilities are used under conjunction situation. And 3 discard probabilities are low probability, medium probability, and high probability. Taken together, these two factors defines 12 service classes, that is priority classes and discard probabilities decides 12 different service classes. Figure shows one way packets might be processed under assured forwarding. Step 1 is to classify the packets into one of the four priority classes. This step might be done on the sending host or in the ingress router. Ingress router is the first router. Step 2 is to mark the packets according to their class. A header field is needed for this purpose. Fortunately, an 8-bit type of service field is available in IP header. 6 of these packets are to be used for the service class, leaving coding room for historical service classes and future ones. Step 3 is to pass the packets through stepper dropper filter that may delay or drop some of them. And this dropping or delaying is done to save the streams into acceptable forms. For example, by using leaky or token buckets, if there are too many packets, some of them may be discarded. In this example, these three steps are performed on the sending host. So the output stream is now fed into the ingress router and it is in regulated form. The next one is label switching and MPLS. Several router vendors were working on the better forwarding methods. This work focused on adding a label in front of each packet and doing the routing based on label rather than on the destination address. Making the label and index into the internal table makes finding the correct output line becomes just a matter of the table lookup. Using this technique, routing can be done very quickly and any necessary resources can be reserved along the path. This new switching is or this new switching idea is called as MPLS, that is multi-protocol label switching. Some people make a distinction between routing and switching. Routing is the process of looking up a destination address in a table to find where it or where to send it. In contrast, switching uses the label taken from the packet as an index into a forwarding table. The first problem is where to put the label since IP packets were not designed for virtual circuits. There is no field available for the virtual circuit numbers within the IP header. For this reason, a new MPLS header had to be added in front of the IP header on a router to router line using PPP as a forwarding protocol. The packet format or frame format includes PPP, MPLS, IP and TCP headers as shown in the figure. The generic MPLS header has four fields, the most important of which is the label field, which holds the index. The quality of service field indicates the class of service. The S field relates to stacking multiple labels in hierarchical networks. If it hits 0, the packet is discarded. This feature prevents infinite looping in the case of routing instability. When an MPLS enhanced packet arrives at the MPLS capable router, the label is used as an index into the table to determine the outgoing line to use and allow the new label to use. The one difference from traditional virtual circuits is the level of aggregation. It is certainly possible for each flow to have its own set of labels through the subnet. However, it is more common for routers to group multiple flows that end at a particular router or LAN and use a single label for them. The flows that are grouped together under a single label are said to belong to a some forwarding equivalence class, that is FEC. This class covers not only where the packets are going, but also their service class because all their packets are treated in the same way for forwarding purposes. With traditional virtual circuit routing, it is not possible to group several distant paths with different endpoints onto a same virtual circuit identifier because there would be no way to distinguish them at the final destination. With MPLS, the packets still contain their final destination address in addition to the label, so that the end of the labeled route, the label header can be removed and the forwarding can be done in usual way using the network layer destination address. One major difference between MPLS and conventional virtual circuit designs is how the forwarding table is constructed. In traditional virtual circuit networks, when a user wants to establish a connection, a setup packet is launched into the network to create the path and make the forwarding table entries. MPLS does not work in that way because there is no setup page for each connection. This is about MPLS. Thank you.